Before we go all the way back, I want to start by taking us back just a bit. Before there was any Kendrick or Drake beef, there was another beef that lit up the internet, and it centered around the Cybertruck.
The reason that upset me is you didn't come for me as a person, which is fine. You came for the integrity of my journalism.
Let me just catch you up to speed. Back in December of 2023, Hagerty, alongside two other large media outlets, that is Top Gear and Marquise Brownlee, were given exclusive early access to the Cybertruck for review. Hagerty wisely put Jason Cammisa at the helm of the review, and he created one of their best performing and probably most entertaining videos so far. As great and as fun and honestly pretty informative as that video was, called out the whole production for being void of virtually any criticism of the Cybertruck, which honestly hasn't aged too well. And Matt from The Smoking Tire was one of those who voiced their opinion despite being friends with Jason. And Jason didn't like this. So Matt invited him onto his podcast, where honestly Jason kind of put a whoop down on Matt, and I guess he wrote a book about it, I don't know. Now, as much as Matt has proven to be a person who does kind of mindlessly criticize Tesla and Elon Musk, all of this hasn't actually aged that well for that Hagerty video. Jason argues with Matt that he's not biased and he's never taken any money from Tesla, which of course, obviously, that's not how this works. The point he overlooked is that when a few select companies or content creators are given exclusive early access to one of the most anticipated vehicles of the past decade, and they're taken through the whole BS thing that journalists are taken through, and the company they're working for wants to keep getting that kind of early access, there is a sort of pressure to make not only an entertaining piece that gets lots of clicks, but yeah, you can't be completely unbiased in a situation like that. You just can't, and that's pretty clear now looking back. There is no mention in that flashy Hagerty video of the failed promises surrounding the Cybertruck, of the glaring safety concerns and just silly design choices, the dishonest way that they pitted the Cybertruck in a race against a vehicle that weighs thousands of pounds more, and just a lack of critical analysis around the vehicle as a real-life vehicle that actual people are going to use and deal with. Just go rewatch that Hagerty video now. Every single part of it feels like a giant Tesla infomercial. And so there's a reason that Marquise Brownlee's much more boring but critical video got 5 times the views of the Hagerty one. Aside from the fact that Marquise Brownlee has such a massive following, it is a more helpful and better review. I'm sorry, it just is. Despite having spent time with Elon himself, Marquise is unwilling to put his integrity at all to the side for anyone, and that's why people love him. And as much as Matt Farah may have had some of the least thought out takes when it comes to cars, he's kind of right about the Hagerty review. It hasn't really aged all that well. Like when Jason bloviates about Elon having this unconstrained rethinking of the pickup truck as we know it. I mean, compare that BS with what Doug DeMuro just said in his review of the Cybertruck.
As people have talked about towing capacity and hauling capacity and all of this truck stuff about the Cybertruck. And frankly, I just think these discussions are moot because people are buying this to be cool. That's the whole reason. Nobody cares if it tows or hauls. And frankly, that's also true of its competitors.
It literally sucks as a pickup. Yeah, the pickup was fine. Yes, it hasn't changed much in the last 75 years because it doesn't really need to. And whatever this is, it isn't the future of trucks because it isn't all that good at anything truck related. It's not really that durable, not necessarily reliable. It isn't all that good off-road. It's not good at towing heavy things or just carrying crap. And it will give you the worst range anxiety you can imagine. And in the Hagerty video, immediately after this bit about Elon rethinking the truck, they just go and drag race it and spend a bunch of time pretty much just racing it. I don't get it. And there's so much more in that video. You know, Jason points out that Tesla's consistently dropping their prices, which isn't exactly true, but he also fails to point out that this gigantic failed promise of a vehicle that is the Cybertruck now costs double what Elon promised. Now, I don't want to pick on Jason too much. I realize that he got a different level of access to the Cybertruck and to the factory and behind the scenes engineering stuff to make his video. But to me, the video he made is kind of a video Tesla should have made, not an independent car journalist. It's not that these early reviewers should have been able to foresee the myriad of problems surrounding the Cybertruck, but seriously, there's zero criticism of it in that Hagerty video, and I say that as a loyal Hagerty fan, but this is a vehicle that may go down as one of the worst in automotive history. Now, why do I bring up this whole, debacle? Well, I think it's a good example of just how much the narrative has shifted in the past 6 months when it comes to the Cybertruck. Now that actual owners have the thing and are using it consistently, and the sort of cloud of hype is clearing, the release of the Cybertruck has been nothing short of a disaster, and all 4,000 Cybertrucks have just been recalled. Not because they're breaking in every imaginable way, which they are, or just because they kind of suck in general. It's because the accelerator, or come on, it's the gas pedal, it's sticking. This is not the kind of vehicle that you want to have a sticky throttle. That's not okay. So, how did we get here with the Cybertruck? In my videos, I like to look at how vehicles from history were developed and what we can learn from their stories. I'm currently working on a video about the history of the Oscar Mayer Wienermobile, which I think I would rather daily drive than the Cybertruck. And it also might be the only vehicle that would turn more heads. The unanswered question for me surrounding the Tesla Cybertruck is how it was developed. What were the real motivations? How did this monstrosity come to exist? And how did it take the shape that it did over the course of its development? And does it have any chance of really succeeding as a truck in the long run? I think a video like this will be much easier to make in, say, 25 years when we know more and more of the behind-the-scenes details get leaked. But I'm going to try to make it right now. So sit back and relax because we're going way back for this one. It's July of 2012, and the long-awaited Tesla Model S has just went into production. This would be the controversial electric car company's first mass-produced production vehicle. Despite not owning Twitter, CEO Elon Musk is tweeting, and his tweets are performing pretty well. In a reply to his own tweet about the goals surrounding the Model S shortly after its release, he says this: "Would love to make a Tesla Supertruck with crazy torque, dynamic air suspension, and corners like it's on rails. That'd be sweet." Now, this is all the way back in 2012, which is pretty interesting. 2 years later, in an interview with CNN, Elon sounded much more traditional about the potential for an electric pickup, stating that it would essentially be like an electric F-150, but that this wasn't really Tesla's focus at the present. Tesla's 2016 master plan did mention a consumer pickup truck, but little detail was given, and we really didn't know where the company was in terms of actually making an electric truck. In 2017, at the Tesla Semi and Roadster unveil, the various elements were teased that would show up on the Cybertruck, things like armor glass. But then also Elon showed this, which was a truck inside a truck. Now, the thing we should note here, as much as the idea of a truck had been brewing over at Tesla for quite a while, we can see here that the idea of the Cybertruck and what it would become wasn't really at all here. This is pretty much just a silly concept drawing. It's very possible that what we think of as the Cybertruck was pretty much at ground zero in terms of being a project, even in 2017. Now, we should have learned our lesson at this Semi unveil. This whole presentation about the Semi was so obviously full of BS and outside of Tesla's capability. They weren't in their lane anymore with the whole Semi thing. Like, sure, this Semi is going to have 0 to 60 in 5 seconds, whatever. And what is he saying about regenerative braking, making it so that you don't need brake pads?
You can turn the brakes into generators. So every time you brake, that kinetic energy of braking goes straight back into the battery pack instead of wearing down a brake pad. So the brake pads basically last forever. You never need to replace brake pads ever.
That makes no sense. Regardless, a move towards making trucks was happening at Tesla. Around this time, Elon was taking suggestions on Twitter, and he talked about making a truck that would be slightly bigger than your average truck to accommodate a game-changing feature, as he says, which I guess would maybe be the air suspension referenced way back in 2012. And that did end up on the truck, or maybe it would need to be bigger to fit the onboard air compressor. More on that in a bit. Fast forward to the end of 2019, Tesla stock is on the up and Elon is once again tweeting. In a reply to his own tweet about buying Fortnite and then deleting it, Elon answered a question from one of his fanboys about the Tesla truck renders that were going around, ones like this one and this one. You know, the ones that actually look like trucks fitting Tesla's design language. They're honestly pretty cool. Anyways, he said that the Cybertruck doesn't look anything like what I've seen bouncing around the internet. It's closer to an armored personnel carrier from the future. Okay. See, Elon just says stuff, so I'm not sure people took this seriously because Tesla designs, they've been pretty conventional up to this point. Like, that's kind of the point, to make electric cars that function better than internal combustion cars, and they look basically the same. You know, Teslas just have kind of looked like Mazdas pretty much. So what was he talking about with this armored personnel carrier from the future? Around this time, Tesla also filed for a patent for the word Cybertruck. Then in November of 2019, the world watched in awe as Tesla held their most iconic and ridiculous unveil so far, the Cybertruck. And this date wasn't an accident. In the Blade Runner movie, the year and month is November of 2019. Rewatching the first Cybertruck event is strange. It feels like such a long time ago. We kind of all forgot about this silly concept vehicle for such a long time, kind of like the Semi and the Roadster. I started watching Tesla's live unveils, starting with the Model 3. This was a different kind of spectacle though. When this thing rolled out on stage, I thought it was a joke. Tesla has made jokes before during their unveils. I really thought this was just a one-off thing that maybe somebody could buy, but that the actual production truck would still be a normal truck. But nope, this was the Cybertruck. But why did it look like this? Now, if someone who knew nothing about Tesla watched this event, I think the big takeaway would be that this guy and his company are trying to rethink the truck to make a better truck. That's kind of the clear message. They'd also probably wonder if this was a cult leader, but that's another story. Elon talks about how trucks have been basically the same for the past 100 years, the same tagline that was fed to early reviewers for the production Cybertruck, by the way. And he then shows some of the iconic trucks through history, expecting us to laugh at these dated designs. Meanwhile, he's showing absolutely iconic workhorse trucks, like the advanced designs and the 4th gen CK. Yeah, who needs those actual trucks? He then shows that modern trucks are almost indistinguishable if you take the logo off, just like every kind of other vehicle, including Teslas. In Elon's presentation, he compares the Cybertruck to the most popular pickup in the United States and of all time, the Ford F-150, which is a worthy competitor, right? It's kind of the gold standard and has been for decades. Elon specifically points out the problems with body-on-frame design. This isn't a new criticism. Few vehicles besides trucks today are still body-on-frame. His main point, though, is that the mass of the traditional truck is on top of the vehicle, on top of the frame, and with the Cybertruck, it's moved to the outside in the form of what he calls an exoskeleton. Now you'd think, okay, that means there's more room on the inside of the vehicle or more bed space, right? Well, no. In this presentation, it's all to serve the purpose of having this quote-unquote bulletproof and sledgehammer-proof outside shell that I guess will be load-bearing. And really the point of all this is that it's tougher. That's the point. It's tough, like really tough, bro. It won't scratch, it won't dent. And then, of course, the iconic armor glass moment. But again, I'm not exactly sure what any of this has to do with trucks and actually making a better truck. The air suspension is one thing that Tesla delivered on, which is pretty cool, and in theory would make it better for various uses from off-road to not off-road. But as we know, it's not really that great off-road in any suspension setup. Oh, and it's important to note that GM has had this technology for a while. Then in the presentation, we get into the truck stuff. Elon said that the Cybertruck would have a 3,500 pound payload, but the production version has a very standard 2,500 pound payload. By the way, the F-150 has a 3,300 pound payload. The Cybertruck would have a 6.5 foot bed length, when the production version is 6 feet, about the same as an F-150, though slightly thinner. And this one's crazy. Elon says that it'll be able to tow 14,000 pounds. For reference, the standard F-150 from 2019 and still today is just over 13,000 pounds. Want to know what the actual production Cybertruck towing capacity is? 4 pounds. No, it's not 4 pounds. It's 11,000 pounds. Elon then shows the Cybertruck annihilating the F-150 in a pull-off, but this is clearly a lower weight, lower spec F-150, making it unable to get any traction. And Tesla is good at this, like having the Cybertruck race a Porsche in a fake quarter mile. The range promises were obviously never going to come true in the real world, and on paper, the production Cybertruck has a fraction of the promised 250, 300, and 500 plus mile range. In all reality, you need to get that gigantic extra battery that takes up most of the bed to get over that 300 mile range mark. Oh, and he said it would float. Meanwhile, it has some of the worst panel gaps I've ever seen on a production vehicle. And he knew that the panel gaps could potentially be a problem, which is why he promised some bullcrap about the panels having 10 microns of tolerances, which is just ludicrous. The only thing that was under-promised, not surprisingly, was the 0 to 60, which of course, we've got to have this gigantic tank be one of the fastest vehicles in the world. It's so stupid. It's 2.6 seconds for the 0 to 60 instead of 2.9. This will all make sense in a minute. The most random claim was that it would come with an onboard air compressor, which would be kind of cool, but it didn't. Of course, it would be full self-driving, which he had promised at like every single unveil, and that crap's never going to happen. And it would start at $39,900 with no incentives. When in reality, if you want a Cybertruck, the price starts at over $80,000 and you'll never get it delivered. Like seriously, this truck's going to be discontinued. Fast forward about 4 years, and the first Cybertruck delivery is happening, and we get another Cybertruck live event, this time to celebrate the production of the vehicle. Out of the two Cybertruck events, the original unveil and the recent delivery, I think most would point to the armor glass incident as, the funniest or most ridiculous moment. But for me, it's the part where this silly, very Tesla-esque promo that plays before this second delivery, it's the part where it switches from this futuristic crap to this traditional truck commercial with shots of blue-collar workers using the Cybertruck as a truck. What the heck? But that lasts for 7 seconds before getting back to the yuppie crap. In the recent delivery event, the tagline is more utility than a truck, faster than a sports car. And that's the tagline that Elon, for some reason, he can't get it quite right.
Something that's more truck than truck. And so what we have here is something that is a better truck than a truck, while also being a better sports car than a sports car.
What does that mean? In terms of the sports car part, in my opinion, the places where Tesla did end up succeeding on some level with the Cybertruck is unsurprisingly here. That's what Tesla is good at. Now, Tesla's definition of a sports car has always been a bit off the traditional definition. Teslas aren't really sports cars. They just aren't. They don't put up good lap times, right? And they certainly don't follow the long tradition of offering, that kind of raw sports car feel. They're not that kind of fun. They're more like modern muscle cars. Incredibly fast in a straight line, 0 to 60, off the line. Of course, they're going to beat everything, right? And that's true of the Cybertruck. So no, it's not faster than a 911, even in a straight line. But again, my understanding is the Cybertruck is somewhat revolutionary in terms of a truck with its car-ish performance, things like steer-by-wire. But how is it as a truck? Let's talk about the design. I want to address some of these claims about the Cybertruck's apparently revolutionary frame design. It seems like Elon was kind of hesitantly claiming that this would be something like a monocoque frame versus a body-on-frame, but he doesn't come outright and say that. He doesn't say this is a monocoque. He does say it's an exoskeleton. What are we even looking at with the Cybertruck? How is it put together? Top Gear called it an exoskeleton. Others have said it's essentially a unibody. The question is, are those steel panels actually load-bearing, as Elon seemed to promise? The truth is, the Cybertruck seems to be just a unibody construction with no floor, same as the Model Y, which is pretty cool for a truck, honestly, but far from being an exoskeleton. That form is technically possible on vehicles, but that would be quite radical for a production vehicle, and especially this kind of vehicle. Tesla has done some pretty cool stuff when it comes to frame design and integrating the large batteries in with the car's frame, and that is true with the Cybertruck, but it's not an exoskeleton. The panels don't seem to be load-bearing, the Cybertruck is pretty much just like a gigantic Model Y in terms of its frame design. Now, for the overall styling of the Cybertruck, Musk has said that there was a heavy inspiration from the Lotus E-Spirit submarine car thing from the movie The Spy Who Loved Me, as well as vehicles in Blade Runner and just the whole Blade Runner aesthetic. Now, there's no mention of the DeLorean for some reason, but come on, the DeLorean is an obvious inspiration, along with just the wedge designs in general. This fits into the wedge aesthetic from the 70s and 80s. And one of the great influences on these Italian wedge designs that the Cybertruck kind of seems to be emulating is Giugiaro, which I'm terrible at pronouncing his name, but it's something like that. He's the designer of the DeLorean and the Lotus E-Spirit, and he commented on the Cybertruck's design, saying that when you step outside of the norms, it's almost always seen as a provocation. The Cybertruck will surely be successful. I'm convinced it will find its admirers. Now, I'm not one to disagree with Giugiaro. Normally, I would applaud such a bold departure from the norm in terms of design. If you've watched my channel, you've probably heard me whine about how boring modern automotive design is. But good lord, if you're gonna break out of the norm, at least make something appealing, because you're now kind of free to use those old school, beautiful design languages. If we can apparently now just use like hard metals, again with sharp edges on our cars, then make us like a classically styled vehicle, not this thing. Now let's put the Cybertruck design in the context of not only trucks, but automotive history in general, because I think this is a bit misunderstood. This is something I haven't really heard spelled out. I believe that the Cybertruck is part of a specific design type from history that is rarely pulled off well, at least in the car world, and I don't really think is pulled off all that well here. I'm talking about retro design. I recently made a video about the retro car boom of the 2000s, if you guys want to learn more about this. These were cars that were made with old design language in mind, made to look old in at least some sense. And though the Cybertruck is a unique approach to this trend, it is a retro vehicle. More specifically, retro-futuristic. Anyone who tells you that this is a purely futuristic concept the way that Tesla wants to present it is crazy. It doesn't really look like your average futuristic concept vehicle. It looks much more old school. So there's this story that Elon tells about his son coming to him and asking him why the future doesn't look like the future. And that's why there's this tagline for the recent delivery event for the Cybertruck, "The future should look like the future." Now, the obvious response to his son's question is this: well, son, we don't know what the future will look like. That's it. We don't know. And the future rarely ends up being what we think it will be. And when it comes to automotive design, the future is based heavily on regulations and trends, and it even relates to political and cultural events, artistic trends. We don't know what's coming in the future, so we can't really know what automotive design will be. It's complicated. It's entirely unknown. And whenever manufacturers have tried to make cars that have designs from the future, they're almost never correct. Think the futuristic American designs from the 50s or the Italian wedge cars from the 70s and 80s. This design looks much more like what manufacturers in, say, the 80s thought that the future would look like, and Blade Runner is a perfect example of this. The Cybertruck is a bold retro design. That's it. It's what the future was supposed to look like when Elon was a kid growing up. And in person, having seen about 6 or so Cybertrucks, it's not really an appealing design, even if the whole idea was executed well, but it isn't really executed all that well. The Cybertruck looks cool from about 2 angles. Otherwise, it looks like a gigantic hotel ice machine on wheels. The proportions are way off. It's a total eyesore, and it's funny and crazy when we see one now, but it won't be in 6 months. It will be the laughingstock of all vehicles, worse than the original Hummer or any of the horrible retro vehicles from the early 2000s, especially when there's millions of them on the road. And if you buy one because you think people will think you're cool, that's not going to work out too well. In terms of trucks, though, how does it stand up to the current crop of what's available? And I'm not talking about drag racing. I don't care about drag racing. Jesus. For towing, it's pretty comparable, at least when it's pitted against other electric trucks. But God, if you're towing in any form, honestly, there's no reason why you would choose the Cybertruck or any electric truck over a traditional, ICE truck. It doesn't have a spare tire, and most importantly, other real truck people aren't going to think you're cool, which is the reason why you buy a truck these days. I remember this was my big takeaway when I saw the Cybertruck. I just thought about truck culture, truck people, and just how much truck people are going to hate it. When you buy a truck, you can bond with other truck people. Not with this thing. I think it's important to know that the Cybertruck project isn't a rethinking of the pickup truck for pickup truck related uses. This was Tesla seeing where the lucrative truck market in America was going, that is towards the expensive luxury segment, and truck owners aren't really using trucks as trucks anymore. So sure, they'll pitch it as a pickup. In reality, it's just another gigantic luxury SUV, a luxury vehicle, by the way, with incredibly poor quality control. And so with the Cybertruck, Elon found a way to creatively jump into the big, super gigantic deluxe vehicle market with a truck that wasn't actually that great at truck stuff and would be appealing to wealthy luxury vehicle enthusiasts. This whole bulletproof exoskeleton and new alloy stainless steel, it's all just smoke and mirrors. This is just another very tech-heavy, very fast Tesla, just with a sillier design language. Anyone who thinks the whole Tesla project is about saving the planet at this point is insane. The Cybertruck is just more silly electric vehicle BS that honestly we're all becoming immune to. The hyper minimalist interior, which at this point just feels corporate and awful, the stupidly placed controls, the overuse of cameras despite having terrible visibility, and the gigantic screen where everything is ran. That's not to say it doesn't have some radical technology. The 48-volt battery thing is pretty cool. The idea of steer-by-wire kind of hurts my soul on a molecular level, not because I think it's necessarily dangerous, but because I still believe there's something special about driving a car. And maybe the steer-by-wire is a cool innovation, but is it an innovation to serve the truck as a truck? Does it actually help make for a better truck? Or will it just make things like backing up with a trailer just a worse experience? But then there's serious safety concerns, not only to those unlucky enough to be on the other side of a crash with a Cybertruck, but even for those in the vehicle. There's a reason cars aren't made of hard stainless steel anymore. And you'd think a company like Tesla would understand crumple zones. Apparently, the first major crash involving a Cybertruck and a Corolla left the Corolla completely totaled, but the person was uninjured, while the Cybertruck looks like nothing happened to it, and yet the driver had minor injuries. When your vehicle is indestructible, you take the brunt of the force versus when your car absorbs the energy. Modern automotive manufacturing is constrained by specific safety regulations to ensure this. That's why all cars and most trucks are blobs void of most fun design language. It's not that manufacturers don't want to make interesting designs, they just can't. So I'm not really sure how Tesla got around this. The Cybertruck is not available in Europe, and it never will be because it's an unsafe design, but how can it even be sold in the US? I honestly could see a class action lawsuit happening when a Cybertruck utterly obliterates a car in a way that no other vehicle could, just because of its shape and the material it's made of. And now with all Cybertrucks being recalled and constant problems like we've never seen before with a Tesla product, one has to wonder what the future of this supposedly futuristic vehicle will look like. One thing is clear to me at least. I believe this is probably the worst truck to ever come out of a major manufacturer. And on top of this, why would you want to own a truck from a company willing to sue you if you sell it? For me, the brooding question with the Cybertruck now is how the heck did this thing go to production in this form and this shape? How is this legal from a major manufacturer? There was a small bit in Jay Leno's feature of the Cybertruck where Franz mentions wanting to get rid of the mirrors altogether and just, have cameras. And there's something really sinister about the way he words this. He says, and we just couldn't get the regulations changed. Not we couldn't get it to pass regulations. No, we couldn't get the regulations changed. Did Tesla actually get specific regulations changed for the Cybertruck? Because the way he words that, it makes it sound like Tesla apparently has the power and leverage to just get these governing bodies to just change stuff when they want them to. Now, we do know that the major automotive manufacturers are somewhat in bed with groups like the EPA, for example, but how in the world did a massively heavy and sharp-edged steel-bodied vehicle pass regulations and safety standards? I don't really have an answer for that question. I do know that trucks here in the US are not really subject to the same safety standards as other passenger vehicles, despite the fact that they're almost exclusively used today as just basically passenger vehicles. And despite the fact that every Tesla model until the Cybertruck has broken records for safety standards, which is really something we should applaud them for, very little has come out about the Cybertruck's crash test ratings, which are not official. And that's pretty simply because they don't have to. It's a truck. And the early footage of testing that we've seen of the Cybertruck is somewhat alarming. No, Jason Cammisa, just because you cringily say, "Are you kidding me? We're talking about Tesla here." I don't care about the name Tesla. This vehicle is on the road now, and it has not been tested the same way other Teslas have been. Now, if you don't believe me in all of this, just look at Tesla's stock and quarterly earnings. 2024 has not been good for Tesla. The Chinese EV offerings are slowly taking over Tesla's share of the market. The stock price and earnings in general are down. The Cybertruck has also been a massive black eye for the company's reputation. They recently laid off 10% of their entire global staff, including just nixing their supercharger group, I guess, the people that sort of manage all of that. If the Cybertruck does end up failing as massively as it seems it could go down not only as the worst truck of all time, which I know some of you might laugh at, but come find me in 50 years and tell me you couldn't see this thing at the top of every worst car ever list. Is that more likely? Or is it more likely that it's a huge success and causes no problems for Tesla in terms of large-scale manufacturing and ends up paving the way for the future? I highly doubt it. But more than all of that, what if the Cybertruck ends up marking the downfall of Tesla as we know it? Tell me that story would not make sense. Maybe this move to making ridiculous, huge vehicles is Tesla's way of doing what every other major American automotive manufacturer has done, which is move away from normal cars and sedans to gigantic, expensive luxury vehicles that are easier to make because they have less safety standards. It could be. If you're looking to get a truck, just go buy an F-150, okay? You will be happy you did, I promise. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed the video, make sure to subscribe. We'll see you in the next one. Drive safe.